In 1929, a man convinced American women that smoking was feminism. In the 1920s, he convinced America that breakfast was bacon and eggs. In 1954, he helped overthrow a democratically elected government over bananas. He was the same man, and you have never heard his name. His name was Edward Bernays, and he did not sell products. He sold beliefs, and almost everything you assume is normal, he had a hand in. Edward Bernays was born in Vienna in 1891, and he was Sigmund Freud's nephew, twice. His mother was Freud's sister. His father's sister was Freud's wife. Two families tied twice. That connection is the whole story. Because while his uncle was using psychoanalysis to understand why people do what they do, Bernays realized the same theory could be run in reverse. If you know why people want things, you can decide what they want. During the First World War, Bernays worked for the American government's Committee on Public Information, the propaganda office. It sold the war to the public as making the world safe for democracy. It worked spectacularly. When the war ended, Bernays noticed something. Propaganda had a terrible reputation in peacetime, but the machinery still worked. It just needed a friendlier name. He called it public relations. He didn't just coin the phrase, he invented the profession. In 1928, the president of the American Tobacco Company had a problem worth a fortune. Women had started smoking, but only indoors. In public, it was taboo, and George Hill wanted that taboo gone. He told Bernays that if women smoked in the street, it would damn near double our female market. Bernays did not make an advert. He went to a psychoanalyst. A. Brill told him that cigarettes were symbols of male power. So if a woman lit one in public, she wasn't smoking. She was taking something. On Easter Sunday, 1929, during the parade on Fifth Avenue, a group of young women stopped and lit cigarettes in the middle of the crowd. It looked spontaneous. It was not. Bernays had sent telegrams to debutantes across New York, inviting them to a feminist demonstration. The woman who lit the first one was Bertha Hunt. She was described in the press as an activist. She was Bernays' secretary. The next day, the New York Times ran it on the front page. Group of girls puff at cigarettes as a gesture of freedom. Papers across the country picked it up. Not one of them mentioned Bernays, or the American Tobacco Company, or Lucky Strike. That is the trick, and he used it for the rest of his life. Don't buy an advert. Manufacture an event, and let the press report it as news. A few years earlier, he'd been hired by a company that packed bacon. Sales were flat, because the American breakfast at the time was coffee and maybe some toast. Bernays didn't advertise bacon. He asked a doctor a question. He had the company's physician write to 5,000 doctors, asking whether a heavier breakfast was better for you. Around 4,500 said yes, which is technically true and completely beside the point. Nobody asked about bacon, but the newspapers ran the headline, 4,500 physicians urge a hearty breakfast. Bacon and eggs became the American breakfast. Roughly 70% of American bacon is still eaten in the morning. You have almost certainly eaten a breakfast that a public relations man designed in the 1920s. In 1928, Bernays wrote a book. He called it Propaganda, and he was not being ironic. The first line is this: "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society." Read that again. He isn't confessing, he's recommending it. His argument was that the public is not rational, that a democracy of millions of people cannot possibly evaluate every question on its merits, and that therefore an invisible group must do the deciding and manufacture the consent of everyone else. He did not think this was sinister. He thought it was necessary. He thought he was a kind of public servant. There is one part of this story Bernays did not enjoy telling. In his own autobiography, published in 1965, he describes a dinner in 1933 where a foreign correspondent told him that Joseph Goebbels kept his books. and was using them to design the Nazi campaign against Germany's Jews. Bernays was Jewish. He wrote that it shocked him. It is his account, and it rests on his memory of one conversation, but the underlying point does not depend on it at all. Bernays had built a set of tools for moving millions of people without their knowledge. Tools do not check who is holding them. Which brings us to 1954, and the strangest thing on his client list. The United Fruit Company was an American corporation that grew bananas in Central America. In Guatemala, it owned enormous amounts of land, plus the railway and the port. Then, Guatemala elected a president called Jacobo Arbenz, who began a land reform. The government would buy unused land from large owners and redistribute it to peasants, at the value the owners themselves had declared for tax. United Fruit had been under-declaring that value for years, so the offer was a fraction of what the land was worth. They were furious. They hired Bernays. He did not argue about land valuations. He ran the Lucky Strike play at national scale. He flew American journalists to Guatemala on curated tours. He fed reports to newspapers and to members of Congress, framing Arbenz not as a land reformer, but as a Soviet beachhead in America's backyard. There was even a film titled Why the Kremlin Hates Bananas. It worked. By 1954, the American press had largely accepted the frame, and in June, a CIA-backed operation removed Arbenz from power. Bernays did not fire a shot and did not plan the coup. What he did was build the story that made it acceptable. Guatemala then entered decades of civil war. When he died in 1995, the Library of Congress released 53 boxes of his papers on United Fruit. Bernays lived to 103. He gave interviews almost to the end, and he never really apologized, because in his own mind there was nothing to apologize for. He also worked on campaigns for Ivory soap, for Dixie cups, and he is part of why bacon is a breakfast food and why bookshelves are furniture. But the thing he actually built was not a campaign. It was a method. Find what people already want, attach your product to it, then get somebody the public trusts to say it for you, so it never looks like an advert at all. If that sounds familiar, it should. It is the entire architecture of the modern internet. Every sponsored post that isn't labeled, every study funded by the company it flatters, every trend that appears out of nowhere and turns out to have an owner. Bernays did not predict the influencer. He designed the machine, and everybody since has just been running it faster. He wrote that the invisible people who shape opinion are the true ruling power of the country. He wasn't warning anyone. He was applying for the job, and he got it.